Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. We will be beginning this webinar in just a couple of minutes. Thank you for joining us today. I see more people are joining. Good afternoon. Welcome to everyone. Buenos días, buenas tardes. Bienvenidos a este webinario. My name is Diana Paez. I am the Senior Director for Energy and Mobility here at the William Davidson Institute at the University of Michigan. Welcome to the webinar today, where we will be talking about automotive suppliers pivoting into the future and the case of Bosal. This webinar is part of our project and partnership with the state of Chihuahua in Mexico called Chihuahua Charging Forward. Today, we're very excited to have an incredible guest speaker who I will be introducing in just a few minutes from the company Bosal. Before we begin, I just want to share a little bit of information about the webinar, some logistics, and also information about WDI and our work. As a reminder, please feel free to use the chat to say where you're joining from and any questions you might have about today's topic. As the presentation continues, please feel free to add your questions also via the Q&A. We will have some time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. Even though we have a hard stop at 2 p.m., we look forward to a discussion and we look forward to you getting as much value as possible from this webinar today. So about WDI, for those who don't know, we are a research and educational nonprofit institution affiliated with the University of Michigan here in Ann Arbor. Our mission is focused on supporting businesses in low and middle income countries around the world grow and thrive. We do this by conducting research, consulting, and knowledge dissemination. In the energy and mobility space, we help energy and mobility innovators and entrepreneurs grow their businesses. We develop tools, knowledge, and partnerships around new opportunities in the context of the energy transition, and we're very interested in highlighting business innovations by different companies in these markets. We hope to connect the dots and help disseminate this important business knowledge. With the state of Chihuahua in Mexico, we have developed a partnership focused on the transition to electric mobility, understanding the challenges, but also the opportunities that this transition brings to businesses and stakeholders across different sectors. Currently, our collaboration focuses on disseminating knowledge and fostering collaboration across 3 areas: industry engagement in the electric vehicle value chain and also related opportunities, talent development for the electric vehicle transition, which is so important across different markets, and developing and fostering Chihuahua and Michigan connections across sectors. We work with 3 partners in the state of Chihuahua: la Secretaría de Innovación y Desarrollo Económico, el Instituto de Innovación y Competitividad, and Frente Norte, our partner for this event today. I would like to ask Oton Cabrera from Frente Norte to come to the spotlight to talk a little bit about this organization. Oton.
Gracias, Diana. Muy buen día a todas y a todos. Básicamente compartirles acerca de la estrategia de Frente Norte es una estrategia de especialización inteligente para Ciudad Juárez, en la cual trabajamos e impulsamos proyectos relacionados a tres ejes importantes. El primero de ellos, manufactura inteligente, hub transfronterizo y cuidado continuo. Y en este eje de manufactura inteligente, estamos colaborando aquí con el William Davis Institute precisamente para impulsar todo este tema hacia la electromovilidad. Y por supuesto, Frente Norte trata de que Ciudad Juárez se transforme a través del conocimiento, la innovación y el desarrollo económico. Esto obviamente nos va a llevar a generar una mayor calidad de vida para quienes habitamos en la ciudad y en la región. Y por supuesto, hacer una ciudad más competitiva a nivel global. Entonces, muchas gracias, sean bienvenidas, bienvenidos, y ahora sí, los dejamos con el invitado.
Muchas gracias, Oton. Thank you so much. So again, today we will be talking and learning about the case of Bosal, an automotive supplier, traditionally automotive supplier company, and a very interesting transformation as a business. We have the great pleasure of welcoming today Cedric Ballarin, Executive Vice President for Energy at Bosal. And I will introduce him as I just stop here so that we can see also Cedric and his screen. Cedric is the Executive Vice President in charge of the Energy Division at Bosal. In the context of the energy transition, he is responsible for the sales, development, industrialization of heat exchangers for stationary fuel cell and electrolyzer applications, and ultimately for the P&L of his division. Previously, Cedric spent most of his career at Forvia, a premium Tier 1 global automotive supplier, in various executive positions, including the presidency of F&K North America. He has served in several high-profile management positions throughout his 30-plus year career history, including extensive international assignments in the United Kingdom, Belgium, and of course, the United States. Cedric is from France and truly a leader in the promotion of trade between France and the US, and has extensive industry expertise that he will be sharing with us today. Cedric, thank you so much for joining us. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all. Thank you to the William Davidson Institute as well as to the state of Chihuahua for inviting me today. I will share my screen next, and we are going to start a conversation about energy and the transformation of a Tier 1 automotive supplier into an energy player. I will articulate my presentation in 4 parts. The first one, where we will spend some time discussing what the energy market is about. Each company is approaching energy from a different angle. It's a broad domain, so I think it's important to frame this conversation under the context of how we see the energy market evolving. Second part, I will briefly discuss the future of automotive suppliers associated with a combustion engine. I think this is well understood and well known. Third part, I will present Bosal. I will explain what we do from a product standpoint and how we are providing value to that energy market. And fourth and last, and probably the most important and the most interesting for all of you, is what are the characteristics and what are the strengths? What are the elements of transformation that we have capitalized upon to succeed in that transformation? And we can take it from there for questions afterwards. So starting with energy, market trends. So market trends, there is an enormous effort across countries, across regions in the world for the development of an hydrogen economy. And we see it in the US with the Inflation Reduction Act. We see it in Europe with the REPower EU plan. We see it in China with their 25 hydrogen plan. So basically, all of those plans consist into boosting the local production of carbon-free forms of energy establishing transportation infrastructure, favoring use and consumption of those new forms of energy. Basically, decarbonization and it's closely associated. National, regional energy sovereignty has come to the top of the political agenda. And this translates into a myriad of R&D projects emerging everywhere in the world relative to the hydrogen economy. We see those projects happening in Europe, in Latin America, North America, Asia. Basically, there is a strong push to introduce those new forms of energy across the world. So what's going on? And why this sudden interest for hydrogen? Why this sudden surge in investment relative to the hydrogen economy? We have to go back to certain fundamentals relative to the economy and the use of energy in that economy. The first one is an ever-growing demand. So you have on the top left corner the world population increase over time. You will see that we are on an exponential curve relative to demographics, simply number of people. On the right side or center stage of the slide, you see that each individual in that population has different energy needs. So the American will consume more than the European, who will consume more than the African. But essentially, we see also a trend, whereas with the increased standard of living improving across the world, with the recessing of poverty to a certain degree, we see the energy per inhabitant of the Earth increasing. So you have a combination of two factors, number of people increasing, and the energy need per person as well increasing. So this creates a tremendous demand for energy. And this is sort of illustrated with the graph on the bottom left, where you see basically the consumption, the various forms of energy, the way we consume them today, whether it is coal, oil, gas, nuclear, renewable. The curve is also exponential, aligned more or less with the population curve. So an ever-growing demand that is facing strong headwinds when it comes to the availability and economics of fossil oil. So fossil oil has been dominating our economy in course of the 20th century. We have seen oil, we are using oil every day in products that we manufacture, in mobility, in the electricity, in the light we consume, and so on and so forth. However, we have what we call the oil peak, and there is the realization that the reserves of oils are not infinite, that at some point we are going to cross over a hump. This is the hump that you see on the left, where basically the available reserves as well as the undiscovered reserves are depleting. This is combined with also the cost of extraction of oil. And this is the graph to the right. And what you see is basically, and I will illustrate with another example, at the turn of the 20th century, in the year 1905, 1910, it used to cost 1 barrel of petrol to extract 99 barrels of petrol out of the soil of Saudi Arabia. So abundant reserve, readily accessible, cheap to extract. Now you take the same ratio and you apply it to the extraction of oil out of shale oils in the US or in Canada. And that ratio comes down to 1 barrel to extract 5. My point here is that as we are exhausting the more readily accessible sources of oil, although reserves are still available, the economics of extracting those reserves is going to become more and more unfavorable. So the logical conclusion is that oil is coming to an end. I don't have a crystal ball. I cannot tell you whether it is 2035, 2050, 2075, but at some point we are going to come, we are going to come short of oil, or the economics of extracting and delivering the oil is going to be such that we are not going to be able to afford it anymore. There is another limitation that is worth mentioning here, which is political nature and which is associated with the climate change. Many countries, most countries in the world, signed in 2015 the Paris Accord, which provide limitations or objectives relative to carbon emission in the future. That is also influencing the form of energy that we are using, hence the search for something else, something outside of oil, outside of gas and coal. So far, renewables seem to be part of the answer. We see the share of renewable energy growing in the consumption of energy worldwide. However, it's important to note that at this moment in time, renewable is not replacing other forms of energy. It's coming in addition to those other forms of energy. And it goes back to one of the slides I was presenting earlier on, meaning with an ever-increasing demand, we are fueling or we are supporting the additional demand in energy with renewable while keeping the consumption or production of fossil oil at the same level. So renewables are moving forward. However, renewables have a strong drawback, is the fact that they are by nature intermittent. What I mean by that is that you have a wind turbine, you have a solar panel. Well, they will create electricity when the wind is blowing, when the sun is shining. And on the other end of the chain, you have a consumption pattern, which is disconnected from this production pattern. In other words, we are going to consume electricity during the day. There's going to be a seasonality of that consumption, winter and summer versus the shoulder seasons. So basically, the two don't talk to each other. And what we have in between, what we need in between, is the ability to store electricity or store energy. It's very difficult and very expensive to store an electron. It's much easier to store a molecule. And this is where hydrogen comes into play. So the future, the way we see it, consists into renewable energy creating electricity, or renewable form of production creating electricity. That electricity, together with water, we do electrolyze, and we create hydrogen. That hydrogen then can be stored, can be transported to the location of consumptions, and is then transformed back into electricity with a fuel cell. And that chain allows you to store the energy and to bridge the gap between the renewable production and the electricity consumption. So I go to the second part. So I think we have covered here the need for hydrogen, the why the hydrogen, why the countries are investing so heavily in hydrogen, because they see limitations in the use of fossil fuels moving forward. There is a push for decarbonization because of a political agenda, and hydrogen sounds like the logical answer to the constraints of renewable energy. Now, I'll put that aside for a minute, and I'm going to talk about the automotive. So Bosal is a tier 1 automotive supplier specializing into emission controls, mostly exhaust systems, meaning we are closely tied to the combustion engine. And I'm quoting here the CEO of GM, which in December, so just 2 months ago, was reiterated the goal of GM, like other OEMs, to end the sales of new combustion engines by 2035. So GM is not alone in that, let's say, with that type of strategy. European Union has announced the same thing, 2035, end of new sales of combustion engines. The state of California in the US have announced the same. So clearly, our future as a tier 1 supplier of exhaust system is compromised. We have only so much bandwidth before the end of our market and the end of our sales. Again, there is lots of debate out there relative whether the date is going to be maintained. My point is that the trend is set, and if it's not 2035, it will be another date, but our future, nevertheless, is the one of the declining sales of exhaust systems in the upcoming future. Third part, I want to talk to you about what we do. And so Bosal aims at contributing cleaner world, constantly innovating, mobility, energy. You have a couple of keywords here. One of them is innovation. We see our future through a transformation that necessarily involves innovation. Mobility, we stay committed to the mobility market because this is where our heritage lies. This is where our comfort zone is relative to the systems we use, the infrastructure we have, the process and capabilities that we have. But we want also to transform our company into an energy supplier or an energy component supplier because we believe that the growth can be there. So quick word about Bosal, founded in 1923. So we are a company 100-year-old, 550 million euro of revenue in 2022, 5% of the net sales reinvested in R&D, 16 production distribution centers worldwide, 6 engineering centers, just under 2,000 employees worldwide. From a footprint, we are global. So I'm pleased to take this webinar from Querétaro. So I'm in our plant in Mexico currently. And I will return to Detroit this afternoon. But we have facilities in South America, in Europe, in South Africa, as well as the commercial and technical offices in both Detroit, in the US, and in China. So we are a global player, and we can deploy technical solutions to our customers worldwide, which is typical of automotive suppliers, but which comes also very handy for energy suppliers, because the challenges that we are seeing on the energy side are also global, and the actors, the players on that market are also global. We have 3 divisions. One OEM, which is the more traditional exhaust systems, which is the majority of our revenue today. Aftermarket, which is more or less the same product, but with a different distribution network. And the third one, which is energy. So we have structured our company, our organization, in 3 separate divisions to cover the market needs independently from each other, because those market needs are also very different. What we do. So now on the energy side, sorry, I went a little bit too fast. We do heat and flow management systems. So heat and flow management system, I go back to the example that I was showing you earlier on the graph, that we have electrolyzers and fuel cells. There are several technologies out there that can deliver the electrolyzer or deliver the fuel cell functions. There is one in particular that is called the solid oxide fuel cell, solid oxide electrolyzer. Other technologies include PEM, proton electron membrane, or alkaline. And these are the ones which are the best known to deliver that type of function. Solid oxide present actually some advantages. It has some attributes. One of them is that it provides the highest efficiency in energy conversion. So if you take, I will take the example of a combustion engine. A combustion engine will deliver approximately a 35% efficiency between the gas you burn and the cinematic energy that you deliver. A PEM fuel cell will deliver between 50-55% energy conversion efficiency. The technology that we work with, solid oxide, delivers 60-65%. So from an efficiency standpoint, it's probably the most efficient technology out there to electrolyze and later on to reconvert back into electricity the hydrogen through a fuel cell. Now, one of the attributes of that technology is that it either creates a lot of heat or it needs a lot of heat to operate. And that's where we come into play, where based on the expertise and the know-how that we have developed over time through the exhaust systems, we are able to manage the heat. We are able to manage the flow of gas circulating around the cell, the stack of cells, and we are able to bring that heat where it matters the most in order to improve the efficiency and to get rid of it when we don't need it anymore. So our application, SOFC, fuel cell, SOEC, electrolyzers, microgas turbine, combined heat and power recovery, and for markets or sectors that range from residential and commercial, so stationary application, delocalization of electricity production, marine mobility application. So imagine a boat. You have a boat with various reservoir of hydrogen. We're fueling a fuel cell, and that fuel cell will require our heat exchanger to manage the heat and flow around the stack so that it can create the electricity, which in turn will propel the boat. Nuclear, we are working on micro reactor heat exchange. Same, nuclear requires a lot of heat transfer from the reactor itself for cooling purposes. And final one, industrial. And industrial, this recuperation of heat. Think of steel, glass factory, where you have furnace which are delivering a lot of heat, and we are able to recuperate that heat and apply it, for example, that waste heat to an SOEC and generate an even higher efficiency than the one I was giving you before. So this is what we do. This is what we do, and how we are positioned on the market with those new products. Well, we are seen as a leader. We are seen on the leader on that market today. That market is very much in infancy. In other words, we are facing an exponential growth, but we are also starting from very low quantities and volume. And there is still, let's say, the volume surge is still ahead of us. And I go back to the first slide I was showing you with the interest by the government to invest, the R&D projects, the logic for the investment into the hydrogen economy. So we are the beginning of the curve, but we see a lot of positive feedback from our customers relative to the performance we deliver in terms of efficiency, in terms of backdrop pressure, in terms of ability to integrate our product alongside our customer systems, the ability to vertically integrate some of the processes, customize to our customers' need, and having the ability to rely on an existing infrastructure. In other words, we are not a startup. We have the benefit of having plants worldwide, to have prototype workshops, to have laboratory that help us deliver the products to our customer. So very significant compounded average growth rates since 2021, with the perspective by 2030 of having the sales that we do at the OEM level coming at the same level as the energy. So if you think of long-term declining sales relative to our automotive traditional exhaust businesses, we are seeing the two curves intersecting by 2030. 2030, the two level of revenue will be more or less at the same level, and after 2030 will be growing beyond with the energy sector. Okay, so this is the last part. This is the last slide. So it's kind of where the magic sauce lies. So how others could do something similar to what we're in the process of doing. I would say that the first building block is technology. In other words, you will not enter a new market unless you have a product, unless you have a process, unless you have a technology that makes a difference. And in our case, but I imagine it's also in most of your case here today listening to me, you have to capitalize on your strengths. In other words, you're not going to invent a technology from scratch. You have to work from your skill set, your strengths, what you're good at today, to deploy that technology into those new markets where you have identified a need. Okay, step number one. Step number two, footprint. You have to think very carefully about your footprint on where you're going to be able to propose this new product or this new functionality to the market. In the case of Bosal, we are lucky, I will say it that way, in the sense that we already have an existing footprint in the 3 major regions of the world, and we are able to offer, let's say, similar products and similar performances to all our customers worldwide at the same time. And there is a strong benefit to be first to market in every regions of the world at the same time. It's a strong benefit, not necessarily today, but strong benefit the day after tomorrow, because by then we will have the facilities producing products in all those regions. We will have benefited from the lessons learned curve, basically the return on experience before anybody else. So having the possibility to produce in all 3 major regions of the world at the same time and being first in those 3 regions is critical to limit the emerging competition. Competitiveness. So it's a third block. And I would say that there is something different between our automotive business model and our energy business model. Our automotive business model, we sell a function that is understood, that is, let's say, well calibrated, that is specified by our customers. So basically, when I sell an exhaust systems to GM, Volkswagen, or others, everybody understands what this exhaust system is going to deliver in terms of functionality, in terms of performance inside the vehicle. It's a given. Therefore, the main criteria for competitiveness relative to that system is going to be the cost of acquisition. It's basically how much I pay for that part, how much I pay for the tooling, and for the original upfront development of the system. Okay? In the energy sector, we have a different paradigm. And the different paradigm consists into I'm producing an energy, a form of energy. Either when I electrolyze water, I create hydrogen, or well, when I do a fuel cell, I take hydrogen and I create electricity. The CapEx versus the OpEx is different than the automotive. What's most important in what I do today is my OpEx, meaning my efficiency. if I'm able to contribute to the energy conversion of hydrogen into electricity at 65% versus 60% or 55%, that 5 or 10% difference in efficiency translates into a much larger dollar value for my customers, customers, because this is energy that we create, and the efficiency of transfer is critical to the end price of that electricity, or end cost, I should say, end cost of that electricity, or end cost of that hydrogen. So when I say that, my focus when it comes to competitiveness is not so much on how much I sell the heat exchanger, but it's more like on how much money that heat exchanger is going to help my customer save because of the efficiency I provide. Okay. Fourth building block is quality, quality in execution at every level. It should not be a surprise. It is something that you need to reiterate through your organization constantly. Quality is what you're judged upon. Quality in the service, quality in the parts, quality in the execution, quality in the timeliness of your deliveries, because this is what will transpire as the perception that customers have of your organization and of your performance. So when I take those 4 building blocks and I look at it a little bit backwards and forwards, how we have articulated those building blocks, but simply in 2022, we created the energy division, and we felt that it was necessary to have a separate entity, not because we want to cut ourselves from the infrastructure that already exists, but because we wanted to give it the necessary focus, because we felt that we needed a dedicated sales force, we needed a dedicated engineering force to be able to tackle our customers' needs and to be more dedicated to them. Today, we supply 8 out of 10 roughly SOEC actors worldwide. 2023, we ramp up investment in R&D and SG&A. So what that meant is that we have optimized our manufacturing processes, we have diversified our products, we have commissioned some semi-automatic production cells that allow us to speed up production as well as to test our capacities. And next year, or this year, I should say, we are focusing on further CapEx. We are focusing on increasing, ramping up our production capacity, maintaining our technical advantage when it comes to certain specificities of our product that allow us to have the high efficiency that I was mentioning before. We are looking at regions. We want to, I would say, continue to invest in the globally, more specifically in North America and Asia. And we want to standardize, optimize some of our processes, accelerate deployment of other applications, focus on quality of execution. So this concludes my presentation, and I'm going to open the floor and then under your control or others to questions as need be.
Thank you so much, Cedric. That was great. Thank you so much. I was taking some notes. I see we have some questions, and I really appreciate you taking the time and also walking us through some of the main aspects and decisions, right? Decision points within Bosal. Super interesting. There's a few questions from the audience, and before I turn to those, I just want to pick up on a few points you made. I think one of the first ones in the context of the energy sector and what's happening around the world. You mentioned, of course, the trend to develop local production capacity for zero carbon energy in different places. This is something that we certainly see as part of our work. And there's, I mean, I think the desire of developing those capabilities for local production, but also it takes a lot, right, for a specific place to be able to develop that. And one of the questions had to do with research and development, investments around that. That seems to be really a cornerstone to be able to develop this type of local production. So what's your take in terms of what you're seeing in different markets? How can a particular place, and in this case, of course, thinking about Mexico, which where most of our audience is from, thinking about how can you develop this type of capabilities and be able to take advantage of opportunities such as for hydrogen production?
Okay, so broad question. I'll try to answer it the best I can. What I see is every country in the world, and I will use maybe a strong word, but that's a word that is important. Every country in the world is scared about the scarcity in energy. I will take Europe as a good example. 2 years ago, the invasion of the Ukraine by Russia put an enormous stress on the European economy when it comes to the availability of gas, which for certain countries is the #1 form of energy to feed their industry. So I think that there is a realization in most countries of the world that energy sovereignty is critical, that we are facing some severe road bumps ahead of us when it comes to the availability of economic availability of fossil fuels, and the necessity for decarbonization because of climate change. So all of these combined create a lot of stress relative to the desire to obtain local forms of energy productions to sort of establish your independence and maintain the ability for your industries and your societies to thrive. I see a race worldwide. Certain countries have really strategically opted for full investment into the hydrogen. South Korea comes to mind as being one. Japan comes to mind. United States comes to mind through the IRA. So I see a lot of countries racing to develop that hydrogen economy as soon as possible. Now, I think you hinted through your question about the scale of the investment. Scale of the investments are considerable. I mean, I attended a conference in the US where basically a representative of the Department of Energy was saying that in order to achieve, let's say, full decarbonization by 2050, entire reliance to some form of renewable form of energy, so no more fossil oils by 2050, I think the level of investment required was in the magnitude of anywhere between $250 to $500 billion a year between now and 2050. The IRA, which is spread over, I can't remember, 5, 7, 10 years, is $369 billion. So meaning it's considerable as an amount, but the magnitude of what we're trying to do is gigantic. So there is, let's say, a very steep hill to climb when it comes to being successful at that conversion of energy, that transition in a new mode of energy economy. And when I say investment, that includes also infrastructure. One thing that part of the answer, I circle back also to your question, is also delocalized form of energy production. Because I think that in the example I gave you with the solid oxide fuel cells, solid oxide electrolyzers, what we are going to start seeing is more and more delocalized form of energy productions where basically you don't rely on the grid anymore. So a factory, a plant will be able to connect to a gas line or will be able to procure hydrogen through truck or trains, and then they will produce their own electricity locally. And that by doing that, you also reduce the reliance on the grid. You also limit the investments relative to the grid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much, Cedric. Absolutely gigantic, as you said, investment. Okay, wonderful. So I have a couple more questions. So I love how at the end you summarized, some of those steps that you think from your perspective that you've used at Bosal that could be also helpful for other automotive supplier companies or companies really in this space. So capitalize on your strengths, think about your footprint, right? And there's a little bit of discussion around like trying to be or gain a first mover advantage, competitiveness, and how the model or the business model can be different, and then quality and execution at every level. And as you were talking about the process, it sounds to me it's a big transition, but it's very much a managed transition, right? What does that take within the company? So internally, in terms of getting buy-in from everybody, it's a strategic decision. So if you can speak a little bit more about what that process entailed, that would be great.
So in our case, it's very simple. It's existential, meaning we know that we know that the combustion engine is coming to an end. Again, it may not be 2035, it may be later, but it's coming to an end nevertheless. So if we want to survive as an organization, if we want to thrive past the end of our main product, we have no choice. We have no choice but, let's say, finding a form of transition into different product, different applications, different market. It's a necessity. So I would say that selling it internally was easy because there is acceptance at every level in the organization that this transition is a necessity for our own survival. Now, I would say that maybe also one thing I forgot to note when I was talking about why this product, why heat exchanger for fuel cell application. It's not like we sat down in a room and 2 hours later, after brainstorming, everybody, the light bulb went on and said, perfect, now we are going to do heat exchanger for fuel cell applications. That did not happen that way. It was a slow evolution. It was, let's say, as the market evolved, as we were talking to our customers relative to what their needs could be, that idea gel together. It was a combination of understanding what the market wants, the pain points, the pinch points of the market, with what our capabilities are. I mentioned the capitalizing on our strengths and so on, and marrying the two together. That marriage did not happen overnight. It happened over, I will push it a little bit, but I would say it happened over the last 20 years. So Bosal has started working on this as an innovation project way back then on like a crazy idea. And as time evolved, we refined and refined and refined both the product, the process, as well as our understanding of the customer needs. And we came to that conclusion essentially 2 years ago when we created the energy division, that was our future. Okay, so it's not an overnight process. It's a lengthy process to find that gem, and every company has a gem in them. I cannot tell you what it is for each of our participants here, but I invite each of our participants to look deep down into their organization, into their product, into their process, and try to marry it with what market, the pinch points may be on the market, and try to develop that process of identification of what the next big thing for them could be.
Thank you, Cedric. Yeah, I love that. Every organization has a gem, right? A hidden gem. And so it sounds like it's been a slow process, managed process, and that you are definitely ahead of the game, I think, relative to other companies. I wanted to highlight that acceptance of recognizing, because I think that's the first step, really, to be able to have a transition plan and so forth. So that's really great to hear. We have two other questions from the audience, and I'm going to combine them since they both refer to the critical piece of talent, right? Developing the talent and having the talent for a company like Bosal, and for products and sectors, including obviously the energy sector, based on this transition. So it says, thank you for this level of presentation of your product. What are the key competences, knowledge, or abilities that you would look for in, graduate students, for example, to work on energy projects like this? And, what type of workforce and talent, specific needs do you have?
Okay. So, very good question. So how did we do the mix of talent in our division? We tried to mix, let's say, the skill sets in relation to what the final objective may be. So, give you some concrete examples. The heat exchanger technology relies on certain processes and certain material that are a direct legacy from our exhaust business. So there are certain key people in our organization who have the knowledge of materials and processes. I think that those people are key joining the energy divisions because they bring with them the expertise of Bosal over the last 100 years in those process and material, irrespective of the application. So it could be an exhaust system, it could be a heat exchanger. At the end, you're talking about steel, you're talking about welding, you're talking about cutting, you're talking about managing tolerances, and so on and so forth. So that expertise is key because that's what's carried the product forward. That's one example. So going back to your question, talent, we are looking at what the process does, what we need for process, and we marry or we pair that need with people who are either already in our organization or outside of our organization. Second example, market. So clearly we are new to the energy market. We are established when it comes to the automotive, but we don't have our marks when it comes to what an Exxon Shell may require, the Air Liquide. We don't have our references when it comes to the business culture of energy versus the business culture of automotive. So what we have done here, we have brought people from the outside. We have brought people from that particular sector, people who have been working in companies involved into the energy that could help us culturally make the shift between, let's say, what we were used to as a model with our current customers to what those new customers of ours may demand from us. And finally, I would take the opposite example. There are also certain people that we have barred from joining the energy division because they were too entrenched in the business model of automotive, where, let's face it, it's a power struggle. There is a lot of arm twisting. It can be a very difficult business to be in, where the customer most often has the upper hand. And we wanted to change that mindset. I want to go back to the business model that I was defining earlier on, where what's most important is not the cost of the part, but what's the most important is the OPEX, meaning the efficiency that we are going to be able to offer to our customers and our customers' customers. What that means is that a salesperson who has been selling automotive goods for the last 20 years may not be the right person to sell OPEX to one of our customers. So I gave those three examples, very different examples. I would say that at the end, you need to have a good understanding of what the objectives are, what do you want to achieve, and you pair your organization in relation to those objectives. And the answer is a case by function, where you either take people from your own team, you take people from outside, or you mix and match in such a way that you create a new culture.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, that's great. And especially that last example or counter example, right, of saying also there might be people with skills for the automotive world, but in this transition is not the best fit. And so organizing the company based on that, I think that, yeah, that speaks volumes about how seriously also you're taking this transition. Yeah, this has been very, very enlightening. We wanted to bring an opportunity and bring a perspective a little bit outside of specifically thinking about electric vehicles, opportunities or parts for electric vehicles. So this is even broader, right? It fits into the hydrogen economy, which, as we know, is growing and has huge potential, and yet coming from a company that has been traditionally automotive. So this has been very, very interesting. Thank you very much for joining us today, Cedric. If you don't have any last insights or anything else you would like to share, I think we'll be ready to wrap up. I know you have a plane to catch very soon.
So my pleasure being with you this afternoon, and I'm looking forward to your comments. If you want to, feel free to LinkedIn with me, look for me on LinkedIn, and wishing you all the best success in your respective enterprises. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cedric. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We will have another webinar later in the spring, in April, so stay tuned for that. Thanks so much.